And we are here. Good evening, Buddy from Texas and Lincoln from Florida. Good to see you guys here. And just a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. It is that time of year in the fall. We got the Apple event that just happened this week, as well as some more stuff coming out of IFA that we didn't get a chance to talk about last week. So a lot to talk about. First off, of course, if you're interested in getting the new iPhones on day one when they ship next Friday, pre-orders start tomorrow at 5 a.m. Pacific. That's 7 a.m. local time here where I am in Central Time. And I think I will be pre-ordering again a new iPhone 16 Pro Max. I was looking at all the different options, but it is a massive phone. It's much, the 6.9 inch screen is very big. So definitely something that's, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with that size just because even though it's only 0.2 inches bigger, it's a little bit heavier. It's still lighter than the 14 version. And it is obviously not essential for me to upgrade. I currently use a 15 Pro. I've been in sort of a weird and extravagant habit of upgrading my iPhone every year since basically I've had one of every single generation of iPhone since the beginning. So I like keeping that streak alive. This year over year upgrade comparison is not nearly as big as, let's say, last year. The 14 to the 15 was a big jump. The 15 to the 16, not quite as much. Although sometimes the years where Apple is more refining an existing set of design and features, I think is actually a little bit of a better year to get a phone, especially, most people, including a lot of you guys, are probably not upgrading every year. And so I think sometimes these years where Apple's had a little more time to refine the details, they've gotten the camera features they put in the Pro Max, they've gotten them down to the Pro size phone. The non-Pro phones get a whole bunch of power, especially this year with the faster CPU they're getting, and the Thread radio, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's some interesting new things about that have sort of come to my attention after I made my short earlier this week. That's going to be a nice big update for non-Pro phones. So I think there's a lot of good buys to have out there if you're in the market to upgrade. That said, you're not getting something that is completely the cutting edge of iPhones. So, you're not getting something that's completely the cutting edge maybe of smartphone technology in general. Apple doesn't have a folding phone. Apple's non-Pro phones are still at 60 hertz refresh rate screen, but all these details are really, in so many ways these days, specs on a spec sheet that don't necessarily apply as much to the everyday use case of a phone. And it's why, a lot of people keep their phones for many more years, and Apple's leaning more into services as a way to grow their revenue, just because the iPhone 12 is still a great phone. That's what my wife uses, although I think we'll be upgrading her this year. So, hey, Brian. Hey, Garance. Nice to see you here. Going to check out the new Watch 10 on Tuesday. Nice debating about the sizes. The jet black, though, I agree. The jet black finish, speaking of the moving over to the watch from the iPhone, that jet black looks really cool. I had the jet black iPhone 7 when that was a thing, and it was a really great phone. I loved the finish on that phone. I'm guessing that the jet black watch is something similar to that. It's kind of this glossy piano black, or it was with the iPhone 7. And I think it looks really good, and definitely everybody's taste is specific to them, but I think it's the best looking of that set of sort of aluminum base level Apple Watch models. I pre-ordered a Apple Watch polished titanium, natural titanium, but I ended up actually canceling the pre-order. So on the watch side, I was tempted to upgrade because I have an Ultra 1, which I love, my Apple Watch Ultra 1. It's still working great for me. As a fiend of all the latest and greatest features, I was disappointed that I was still missing out on on-device Siri on my watch. So I was hopeful that maybe that would make my watch a faster way to control my smart home. And so I was interested in getting that with the new Apple Watch. But I realized that even though I want that new feature and I like the look of the new display, there's a lot of the elements of the Ultra that I still really prefer. And I like having the action button. Even though the screen's not quite as big on the Ultra as the Series 10, it's still just a really nice screen. I like the way the case looks. I like the style of a lot of the bands. And it is kind of the in watch. There's a lot of people wearing the Ultra style of watch, the Ultra 1, Ultra 2, which both look identical externally. And I just can't justify, obviously, spending all that money on an Ultra 2 when it's only one generation upgrade from the Ultra 1. So I think I'll probably hold off for the Ultra 3 or something later on next year or beyond with my watch and just live without the rough, terrible life without on-device Siri. So impoverished over here. But still just loving my Apple Watch Ultra. If you're considering upgrading to an Apple Watch Ultra, I think I've heard good things about the Ultra 2. My Ultra 1 is still held up great. It's a really cool watch. It feels a lot like various kinds of rugged cars, like a Ford Bronco or some kind of a Jeep or something else that's more all-terrain. Just it has a little bit of that feel to it, but it also is just a lot of people wear diving and extreme sport watches, even in dressy scenarios, even outside of this. So outside of smartwatches. So I think it's a really cool concept Apple did. And you don't need to be someone who camps every weekend to get an Apple Watch Ultra, in my opinion, at least. So you're still going to get nice value of the battery life. I love the action button. And that's one of the killer features that I use every day on my Apple Watch Ultra, speaking of, which is I have an action button shortcut, which just sends a message to my wife to tell her the words "leaving now." And I could make that a much fancier shortcut that looks at my location and does something to calculate the travel time to wherever. But there's so many different contexts where I might want to send that when I'm leaving home or when I'm leaving some other place and headed home. And she'll know the context if I'm sending her that message. And I don't usually get too many accidental presses of that. And even if it is, then she can probably guess the context that it's probably not, I'm not actually leaving now, or that was a mistake. But yeah, it's actually really handy because then when I'm in a hurry to leave someplace and I want to tell her that I'm leaving that place, I can just hit the button on my watch and then it will send that message without any need for confirmation from me. So that's, well, you can do all kinds of different stuff with the action button on the Ultra. That's what I use it for, and I find that really valuable. So, yes, you were eyeing my Watch Ultra when we met up. Yes, Brian. Brian and I, if you don't know, Brian lives over in Michigan. I live here in Illinois, and when my family was over on vacation in Michigan, Brian and I met up. And it was just fun to hang out with Brian and talk in person about all kinds of smart home tech stuff. And he and I are also both geeks about cameras, so there's that whole side of it as well. So great to see you here, Brian. And it's fun to have people, where you connect online, social media, get to know each other better and better and better, and then eventually become actual friends, like outside of social media. So it's always cool. So that is the iPhone announcement. Let's look here at my list of all the other things I have to talk about. One of the things that I just had on in the background as I was getting some things set up for this live stream and filming a quick unboxing for something before this was the Oprah Winfrey special on AI that's tonight live on ABC. Talking about AI, they had Marques Brownlee on there, as well as Sam Altman, founder of ChatGPT. If you're watching this program and you're following the tech news, there's probably not anything that that would be news to you about that program. But I think it's an interesting commentary on the state of technology and the state of what people are interested in, the sort of zeitgeist, I guess you could say, about AI and the fact that that TV special exists in the first place, I think is an interesting thing and shows that there's a lot of general interest out there in AI. And I think will be, it's I think also part of why Apple's leaning into Apple Intelligence so much as they're talking about their new products this fall, because they know it's something that people are interested in, just the concept in general. And so I also find it funny, as you probably do too. Of course, last year at CES, everything had quote unquote AI in it. And it's gotten so bad that earlier this week, my recycling bin was not collected on our usual trash and recycling day. I looked at, thankfully I have my Ubiquiti camera continuously recording my driveway. And so I was able to see that the trash truck, I have footage, just the recycling truck just missed our spot and went on to our neighbors. And so I called the company about it. And when I got the phone tree, it was one of those classic automated phone trees that I'm sure you've dealt with, where it just asked you to say this or this, or was this such and such, and it's a yes or no question. So like very basic voice prompts. But of course, at the beginning of the call, it introduced itself as an AI assistant to help me with my customer service complaint with the trash company. And then of course, I did this. And then a human called me back about 10 minutes later to clarify the details and then say that, they filed a work order and stuff. And then, of course, someone came the next day to pick up the recycling they missed. So no big deal in the end. But it was like that phone tree, that kind of concept has been around for how many years now? And they're starting to call that AI powered now. And it's like, that's not AI, but whatever. Do you prefer iPhone upgrade to the 16 Ultra Blue? Yes, the iPhone non-Pro color, so the 16 and 16 Plus, the colors on those phones look so good. I'm going to pull those up because I think it's really interesting. It's a bummer that Apple does not put these nice colors on the Pro phones. I'm probably still going to go with the Pro versions because as a video creator here on YouTube, it would be really nice to have 4K 120 ProRes video on my phone as something I could shoot. I don't have my Sony FX30 that I'm shooting on right now for this live stream. That can shoot 4K 120 at a crop. And of course, that would, in a lot of ways, be better quality video than an iPhone. But of course, carrying around a Sony FX30 is carrying around a big camera, and I always have my iPhone with me, at least in theory. So that is a real reason for me to upgrade. But the iPhone 16 is essentially getting the 15 Pro's camera, as best we can tell, from last year, and it's a very good camera setup. So I think if you're upgrading and considering it just for the colors, I mean, it's just gorgeous colors on the new version. So let's flip over to, here we go. Yeah, just this ultra blue color, just so beautiful. So I wish they'd make Pro phones with this. It's annoying because usually Apple makes the good Pro colors in the spring, and it'd be nice to get them in the fall when a lot of people like myself like to upgrade their phone. Maybe not every year, but like if you're buying a phone, you want to get the latest, you buy it in the fall, and that's not when the good colors come to the Pro phones, which is kind of annoying. But I also love that they have the stereoscopic lenses on the non-Pro phones. The 3D or spatial videos and photos in Apple Vision Pro look really cool, and I think it's one of those things where, yeah, you are probably not going to buy a Vision Pro, and if you do, that's great. But I think it's one of those things where if you film the spatial stuff occasionally now, there'll probably be a device where you can view it in a really cool way in 5 or 10 years. And that's really when you're going to want to see those valuable moments from 5 or 10 years ago. And so to have a phone that does spatial video capture, I think is It's really nice. So that's another thing I'm excited to see come to the non-Pro phones. And speaking of the big news from all of this is that they added a thread radio to the non-Pro iPhones, which means that more and more iPhones are getting a thread radio. And there's actually more about this in, there is a fly flying around my office, so hopefully it doesn't get distracting for you. But I'm going to pull up my notes on iOS 18 here and talk about something with this thread radio that someone pointed out to me on Threads. Speaking of Thread, the Threads social network about this, which is that Apple's mentioned in the iOS 18 release notes that you'll be able to pair Matter accessories without a hub. You'll be able to add locally controlled Wi-Fi based Matter accessories or Thread Matter devices with you'll be able to add Wi-Fi based Matter accessories without a hub with basically any Apple device that works with Apple Home. But then, any like iPhone or iPad. But if you have one of these iPhones with a thread radio like the iPhone 15 Pro or the iPhone 16 or 16 Pro, that will work as well. And the other thing that I didn't catch this spring when they came out with them, but the iPad Pro with the M4 chip, as well as the new iPad Air with M2 chip, also have thread radios in them. So that speeds up their smart home communication as well. Now, I've been kind of just wondering about, like, what is the benefit of that? And Apple just quietly put the thread radio into the iPhone last year. I think their main intention is probably around this of making setup of Matter devices much easier. I also think anecdotally that it does make your smart home faster in terms of communicating from my iPhone or to other devices and setting scenes is so fast and reliable compared to, let's say, talking to a HomePod Mini or even a full-size HomePod. And I think that there's just part of that is the speed of the voice processing that the iPhone can do. I think it's just a much better processor and microphones and stuff to figure out what did the user just say and how to interpret that. But it's also just a matter of that I think that it's using Thread and Wi-Fi to directly talk to devices. I don't know that. I don't have any proof of that. I don't have any way to prove it, but it's just anecdotally in my experience, when I want to get something done fast in my smart home, especially if it's like a big thing where like maybe I want all the downstairs lights off. It's really fast to just tell my phone that, boom, it's done. And so just keep that in mind as I don't like the idea of having to pull out my phone to control my smart home, but if it works really well, I'll do it. So, and it's one of the benefits of Apple Home 2 to have all that integration. So there's a lot more stuff coming in iOS 18. You'll probably see me talking about that sometime soon on the channel, but that is one feature that I thought was interesting, especially to smart home power users who might tune into these live streams, just giving you some things to think about there with what these thread radios might be doing in devices, and that it's coming to more and more Apple devices. It really starts to feel like something that is just going to grow across most of the Apple product line. I can't imagine them putting a thread radio in a Mac, but who knows? If it's easy to put it on the system on a chip, maybe they will. So that is that topic. Another thing that came out at IFA earlier was, and feel free to put your questions down there in the chat if you have any questions. We'll get to those in a little bit. But one thing that came out at IFA that I forgot to mention last week when we had our live stream is this new sync box from Philips Hue. So they now have a version of the sync box that supports 4K 120 hertz, and that also does HDR10 plus and Dolby Vision. So before you're really taking a hit to your video quality if you're running things, or not really a big hit, but in certain cases you'd be losing out if you were playing, let's say, Dolby Vision or HDR10 content through the old Philips Hue sync box, or the big one too is gaming at 120 hertz on a monitor or TV that could play it at 120 hertz. If you're doing it through a sync box, then it's going to be at 60 hertz. So the new sync box takes that to the next level, as the marketing says, and you can sync up to 10 lights. And but oh wait, I'm sorry, I got this wrong. I remember seeing this and then completely forgetting. It's 4K still at 60 hertz, but it's 1440p at 120 hertz. So yeah, but new sync box for HDMI devices. And not too much to say there, but I did just wanted to mention it in case you use sync boxes. I personally am not really into this whole tech. I've tried it out with a few different vendors. It's kind of cool, but I don't really get it. It's not really something I'm into. I think that it's one of those things that looks more enticing than it actually is in experience and practice of having this bias lighting where all of a sudden, outside of your TV, there's immersive lighting that matches what you're seeing on the frame. It's I think probably Philips Hue is one of the better options that's going to be more reliable. They also have ways to integrate it with your Mac or PC without a sync box. You can use an app on those and control it. I've tried that on my channel ages ago. So it's a whole platform from Philips Hue with this sync system. Oh, and okay. I thought I misremembered the specs because I was looking at the old. This is the old. I clicked on a link and I got a little confused because it said here 1440p for, where was it? 1440p for 120 hertz. What I was trying to show you, and I thought was the case, is that this new sync box, which was not what was on the screen earlier, does up to 8K. So I think this one is the new one. And it can do 4K at 120 hertz to HDMI 2.1 or 8K at 60 hertz. So I don't know if anybody watching TV 8K at 60 hertz at this point, but maybe you are, and that's pretty cool. So, yeah, I must have copied the wrong link to my notes because this is what I was thinking of. It's $350, so $250 for the the lesser sync box, and then $350 for the newest and best one. So again, not something I really care too much about. Govee has another product of this that they announced at CES like this that does some special stuff around explosions. Some companies like Nanoleaf and Govee use a little camera that mounts above your TV to see the signal. The advantage there is that then you don't have to worry about the box supporting different HDMI standards. It's just around whatever content shows up on your TV, it's there. And I've reviewed them in the past, and so I know a lot of people like these kind of setups, but it's just not really something I'm very much into myself. Let's go back to my list here. One other thing I'm going to pull up really quick is stjude.org/relay. I'm a big fan of a lot of the podcasts over on relay.fm. They cover a lot of Apple related topics, and they do a fundraiser every September for St. Jude Children's Hospital and the research that St. Jude Children's Hospital does to prevent childhood cancer. And they have, this is their page all about their fundraiser. I gave anonymously earlier today. Maybe in the future we'll do some kind of smart home sub giveaway of their larger giveaway. But if you just go to stjude.org/relay, it is a good charity. And just to raise awareness about it, maybe you already listened to relay.fm podcast yourself and have heard about it, but just know that it's something I think is a great idea and encourage you to consider giving. If you're a fan of ATP as a podcast, you can also go to stjude.org/ATP and that will take you to the Accidental Tech Podcast fundraiser for that. So just something to consider if you are looking to do that. So looking, go back to this. So the AirPods Max was one other thing from the event that I wanted to cover. And that is kind of puzzling because I know the AirPods Max were already getting pretty old, relatively speaking, and they still have Apple's H1 chip, and now the Apple's moved to newer generations of the H processor in their AirPods Pro. And it's like, I think Apple kind of got themselves into a box of just people in the tech industry judging them because they named the processor that they're putting in those headphones. And I think that now that we know that, or we could also see it from the features, right? If you can just look at the feature checklists, and AirPods don't support things like conversational awareness. AirPods Max don't support conversational awareness and other details. And it's a bummer that Apple didn't update those, but I think update the AirPods with all those features. All they did was just add a USB-C port. But the point that I'm trying to get at here is I think we hold Apple to a higher standard there because they do disclose what chips they're using. They don't really talk about the clock speed, like how many megahertz or gigahertz it is, but it's an interesting side too of the HomePods, because of course the HomePod Mini and the HomePod full-size generation 2, they both run Apple Watch chips, and Apple has publicly stated that those are the chips they run. It's not really in the forefront of the marketing, but if you dig down in specs and things, it will tell you those chips that it's running. And of course, if you tore the HomePod Mini apart, I'm sure you could figure that out. But I think it would probably be a good move for Apple. Not for us. I wouldn't like it, but I think it'd probably be better for them to just move to not really talking about the details of the chips that are in these, and maybe even making it so like if you tore it apart, it'd be kind of hard to figure out, oh, is this an S8 or is this something else that's similar? I'm sure some people could reverse engineer it or look at some of the details, the core counts and the clock speed of the cores and the different cache configurations and figure out like, oh, okay, this is this kind of a chip. Someone would figure that out. But I just think it'd be better for their marketing if they didn't talk about the chips inside of these audio devices, because I think that they're making them more as audio devices than they are computers in your ears or on your table that's a speaker. It's more an audio device than a computer. And audio devices probably don't need all the processing power. And I just think of the HomePods less and less as the hub of your smart home. It is a way for your smart home to communicate with smart home devices, but it's not really the central hub. And I just think that the AirPods Max are another sign of like Apple sort of taking this high-end audio market and just not really caring too much about the specs, because in their view, they don't necessarily need to. And AirPods Max are very expensive. I wouldn't recommend buying them, but I think they're not really for us as a target market. They're really for folks who want some kind of a luxury fashion accessory. And that seems to be what AirPods Max have almost become. They've really risen in popularity as they've had some sales over the past couple of years. And I think more people have gotten them. And it's one of those things too that I think caught on a little bit in social media outside of the tech space recently, like let's say the past 12 months. But so I think Apple saw all that and realized they didn't really have to do much other than just put a USB-C port on them and they'd be fine. And so that's what they did. I'd love to see more from Apple over-the-ear headphones. But in the meantime, AirPods Pro 2 are just amazing. And I think they're one of the most underrated products from Apple in terms of just something that's so seamless, so easy to use, has so much power in it. And they're adding to that even more now with, of course, the hearing aid technology, which is amazing. But then also just the ability to nod to Siri when you're doing things like you could shake your head, or you can back and forth or up and down to say yes or no as it's talking to you in your ears. So just some really cool tech there with AirPods Pro 2. And so we'll see with AirPods Max what happens. I'm bummed that they didn't get more of an update. I'm certainly not going to buy any of them, but I just think that Apple should move away from talking too much about the specs of the chips and things in those audio products, because otherwise they're just going to set themselves up for disappointment in the tech press, sort of keeping score of like, well, that still has the H1 chip. So anyways, a little bit of a roundabout way of getting my thoughts out there, but hopefully that made sense. So we've, oh wow, look who's here in the chat. We got Edgar's Home Tech. We have, nice to see you, buddy. And then the one and only Mr. Shane Watley. Hello. Thank you for joining. It's good to have you here. So we went through a bunch of stuff about the Apple event, talking about the different details of the iPhone having a Thread radio and the recent iPads. I think it's really exciting. How the Apple's adding a Thread radio into more of their devices, presumably for matter ease of setup, but also I'm thinking for better smart home control too, but it's hard to prove that one way or another. Apple did receive FDA clearance. Yes, you're right, Carl, for the hearing aid concept with the AirPods. So here in the US, that'll be able to be sold as over-the-counter hearing aid. So that's really exciting. I think that's, talk about, a lot of folks in the tech industry love to talk about technology that changes lives and making things that change people's lives. That will literally change a lot of people's lives by enabling them to use those as a hearing aid. I think that's so cool. So, oh yeah, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, Edgar, but who's pre-ordering tomorrow? You're getting an iPhone 16 Pro. Yeah, I'm going Pro Max. I was mentioning at the start of the stream, I've owned one of every single generation of iPhone. And I kind of want to keep that streak alive, although this year the reasons to upgrade are very slim. So I am excited about 4K 120. The camera control, I think, is a really cool concept that Apple is, again, like the Dynamic Island. I heard this on a podcast I was listening to past couple of days, but they've just over-engineered that whole camera control detail. But I think it's really cool. I'm here for it, and be exciting to see. So yeah, 5 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning are pre-orders. And I don't know, Brian. Oh, so Brian was asking about the AirPods Pro 4. I think they'd technically be called the AirPods Pro 3 because the AirPods Pro 2 with USB-C are still considered AirPods Pro 2. So either way, though, I kind of feel like AirPods Pro 2 are going to be Apple's latest and greatest in that space for a while, but we'll see. It's hard to say. They could come out with a new version sometime soon, but they've been doing so much to enable so many different things with AirPods Pro in the software. I would bet we won't see an update to AirPods Pro until maybe the fall of next year. I think Apple likes to put them out in the fall, sort of before the holidays. They've done a bunch of AirPod announcements at these September events. Speaking of audio updates, I really hope we get new HomePod minis. I would love to just see a spec bump of the HomePod minis, but that brings me back to my point earlier about Apple kind of painting themselves into a corner of like, now we know what the processor is in the HomePod mini, and we know it's this many generations old, and we know that Apple's been making new versions of Apple Watch chips since that old HomePod mini. I think if they had never told us any of that, we wouldn't be, holding our breath for a new HomePod mini. And I wouldn't be surprised if Apple doesn't give it to us. I wouldn't be surprised if the HomePod mini just sticks around as is for at least another year, but I would love to see it. I'm totally all for a HomePod mini update. I think Apple should do it. And here's that spec chart I was talking about earlier where they have here's all these have the H2, and here's the new AirPods Max down here with the H1, and missing a lot of those features. So real bummer. And of course this lovely smart case, which is, not all that great, but I will say, having used the AirPods Max Lightning version, I obviously haven't tried the USB-C ones and I'm not getting them, but they are very good sound. And especially if you are in one place you might not, they're great noise canceling if you work in an open office. And I think if you're using headphones every day, it's an expensive investment, but maybe you could sort of justify it by, well, I'm going to use these every day at work. And then also, if you live in a place where maybe you watch TV on Apple TV where you want to have good surround immersive Dolby Atmos audio, but you would be waking other people up, either your neighbors or people who you live with, by watching TV that way. The experience of just quickly pairing AirPods Max to your Apple TV is very straightforward. You just usually press the TV button when they're nearby, but you can also connect to it in Control Center on Apple TV, and that's really nice. You can do that with any of the AirPods, but the over-ear, just immersive sound of the AirPods Max is amazing. So I think that's another place where if you've been on the fence about AirPods Max, that's something that might be another use case that would push you over the edge. I'd also say if you're in the market for those kind of headphones, waiting around for sales, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a sale on those some point. Apple's discounted the Lightning ones a bunch, and so who knows? Maybe end of this year, early next year, you might see some sales on AirPods Max. So, any questions we have in the chat? Thank you, Brian, for answering that Home Assistant question there. Robert's getting the Pro Max in black. I'm getting a natural titanium, but also Pro Max. I'll get to upgrade. I just haven't decided which Pro size I want. I agree, Shane. It is, it's a big 6.9 inch phone if you get the big one. So, I mean, the 6.3 inches on the non-Pro is still plenty big. I just thought if I'm going 6.3 inches, it would be one thing if they kept the old Pro at 6.1 or like a smaller body size, then maybe I'd still lean towards the smaller one and be like, well, look at how much smaller the phone would be, how nice that'd be to hold. But if I'm already going to be at 6.3 inches, then let's just screw it. Let's just get the big one. So that's my thought process. Black Pro Max from Carl. Yeah, I agree, Garance. The camera control is a really cool concept, and I think maybe, they leaned so much in the dynamic island when they launched the dynamic island of all the live activities and stuff you can do with it. They did that some with this iPhone event, but I think it's another one of those level of things that just is so Apple in the way they design it and the animations, all the details. Apple's so good at making these hardware features that then have these fluid animations into what happens on the screen and making that, of course, it's an OLED screen, so it looks almost like the screen just temporarily indents as you're looking at that view. I'm just guessing based on, the dynamic island, but I think it'll be a really cool feature. But again, not a must-have. If you're sitting there with a 15 Pro, I wouldn't feel like you have to upgrade unless you're a crazy tech YouTuber like myself or someone else who like talks about this stuff, I guess. So yes, and Apple did release PDFs. I went through them with the Thread Radio and the iPhone. They also have details about the robot vacuum integration coming later this year and all kinds of stuff in both. They have an iPad, iOS and an iPadOS PDF. So both of those are worth checking out. It's a nice summary. If you haven't, you can Google for it and find them. I was looking through those earlier today. And my other advice on those, always read the footnotes. There's a bunch of useful information in the footnotes. And if you don't feel like downloading a PDF or reading it, I'm sure myself and other YouTubers here in this chat will have content and videos for you explaining what all the footnotes and all the details mean sometime in the future. But yeah, it's definitely great for Apple to be putting out these nice documents about what's going on. Yeah, some praise for the AirPods Max. Even though they are Lightning, absolutely love my AirPods Max. Yeah, I mean, I will say I like the sound quality of having them on. I just think it's kind of a shame technologically where they're at from a non-audio perspective, not just like the act of having them on. But yeah, I have a pair of AirPods Max and I use them regularly when I'm working at the co-working space. Do I use AirPods for video editing? Yes, I do, but not final video editing. The latency connection of them to my Mac is very good. So I find it with now I use Final Cut. So maybe Apple's pulling some special magic sauce between Final Cut and Mac OS and the AirPods, but I find any latency to be barely noticeable. I've even, like, for things like CES, edited and maybe I didn't publish my full video without listening to it on something other than AirPods, but, like, I've gotten pretty far into the editing process with even just AirPods Pro, but AirPods Max as well. So sometimes I'll need to do some quick editing or something when I'm out and about, and it's nice to have those options, and they do work for that. But yeah, I mean, certainly not going to be quite as good as a wired pair of headphones or stuff. And Apple does have that cable that does make the AirPods Pro or AirPods Max wired, but I don't own that, and I don't know. It's not really something I've been into myself. Is Apple Intelligence coming to Apple TV or HomePods? Unfortunately, no, Chowder. So I'd love to see this. I had a video earlier this year on my channel just fantasizing about maybe how Apple could make something like personal requests. Of course, you've probably seen if you set up a HomePod or Apple TV, especially I don't know if it's in the Apple TV setup, but it's in the HomePod setup where it tells you about personal requests. And that basically means that it will recognize your voice and then be able to talk directly to your iPhone or other Apple devices to do things like add reminders or calendar events and stuff that's specific to you, messages. And I would really love to see that tie into Apple Intelligence, but I don't think it's going to actually happen. So we'll see. The Pro is enough for me. Yes, that makes sense. Makes sense, Edgar, going back to that conversation. And this year, thankfully, you're still getting the 5X lens. I found that 5X lens on the 15 Pro Max that, of course, on the 15 line, the 15 Pro Max was the only phone that had that 5X zoom. And for my oldest son has been learning cello. And then when he has cello concerts or just, anytime, especially if you have children, but I'm sure there are other cases where you're trying to film some kind of assembly or concert or a sporting event and you want to just get in closer to the action. That 5X camera really makes a difference. And Apple's done a lot with the stabilization there to make it so you can actually film handheld with a 5X zoom. And of course, it looks shaky, but it doesn't look all that bad. And it's not going to be quite as good picture quality as if you filmed with like a big camera or the wide lens on the iPhone, but it's going to give you way better clarity on whatever it is further away because it's able to optically zoom in so far. So good update to the non-Pro Max. So the Pro size phones are getting that 5X lens. I think that's a really handy lens to have, practically speaking, when you're just trying to document your life. So Shane, you're just it's like you do this with people on your own to have all these questions you've probably been asked as well. Which is one smart home product you have a love-hate relationship with? I would say it's in general the HomePod minis, because when the HomePod minis work well and they do like multi-room audio or things like that, my kids love to play music on them. That it's really nice. Like, they sound so good for their size, and now they come in all those cool colors, including midnight, of course, at the latest. But there are plenty of times where they're just slow to respond to something or don't really get what I'm asking with a smart home command, or just, don't actually do what I want and say that it's having trouble connecting the internet. And I've tried all the troubleshooting things with them, and they go through phases where like one will work well for a while and then it'll stop, and another one will work well for a while. So yeah, I love HomePod minis when they work, but I hate them when they don't. So that's something there. Yeah, I agree, Will. The AirPods Max should have been updated with the H2 chip. That would have made a lot of sense. I'm guessing there's somebody in Apple either A, didn't want to spend the money on putting the H2 chip in there. They cut into those massive margins they already have on that product. But also at the same time, maybe Apple doesn't think that those features like conversational awareness would make sense. I know a lot of people in cities, I've seen wearing AirPods Max in public, which makes no sense to me. Obviously, the transparency mode on AirPods Max is very powerful. You hear a lot, which is kind of a deceptive thing. You could be like sitting next to someone and they think that you can't hear them because you have headphones on, but you can hear them really well with transparency on. But there've been stories about people getting the AirPods Max snapped off their head when they're on the street, which makes sense. That's why I wouldn't wear them on the street. But I don't know why Apple didn't put the H2 chip in there, but maybe they just think that those features don't make sense on the AirPods Max, which I disagree on, like conversational awareness and the head turning and things like that. Next gen Apple TV. I heard Stephen Robles talking in his primary technology podcast about this week, about maybe we'll get an update to the Apple TV. I think what they would do is probably the new iPhones have the A18 Bionic or no, A18 Pro, and then the last year had the A17 Pro. Last year's chip in the iPhone seems to be a little bit of a problem that Apple's trying to get away from. Yeah, it's A18 this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Apple TV with, let's say, maybe not the A18 or A17, but the A16 Pro, or we could maybe even see it with an M series processor. I think the reason Apple would update the Apple TV is if they are bold enough to think that they could push into the gaming market and make something that really appeals more in gaming. Of course, given the market share of the iPhone and the capabilities of the hardware, they have a lot of share of mobile gaming. And I think Apple views gaming as a potential growth area for them. So I think that is a motivating factor to want to update the Apple TV. Of course, us smart home folks would come along for the ride and have, some of those other features added where we could hopefully use Apple Intelligence and do some more with smart home control and maybe have it be a bit more performant with maybe even higher resolution HomeKit secure video. Imagine that, processing 4K footage. But I'm not sure. We'll see where they come with that. Which, by the way, speaking of HomeKit secure video, I forgot to mention last week it had just sort of broken the day of the live stream, and I hadn't caught up with it. I think Edgar's Home Tech, you mentioned it on the stream, but the new Aqara camera, the new outdoor G5 hub, they have an option that works with power over Ethernet, which is so exciting to have a HomeKit secure video camera that works with power over Ethernet. That's just, I feel like all of us here on YouTube talking about that and how great power over Ethernet cameras are. And we have our power over Ethernet cameras and our HomeKit secure video cameras. Finally, Aqara is bringing the two together with the G5. So I can't wait to get my hands on the G5 and talk about it. But that's a really cool development that I forgot to mention last time. William, nice to see you here. Let's see, more questions. The main reason I'm buying the new iPhone is for the 5X or better someday Zoom. I think that the Zoom, as I mentioned earlier, is a big upgrade. It's good to hear you think of that, Garance. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the Norwal vacuum? Let's see. I actually don't really have many thoughts on that yet. I need to collect my thoughts on the Norwal vacuum, William. So I don't have much to say there right now. I've got an iPhone 13 Pro, really trying not to upgrade. Don't think it's worth it. I agree. For normal everyday use, there are some nice quality of life upgrades between something like a 13 Pro and and the latest iPhone. It's this is the 16 Pro. All the numbers are confusing. iOS 18, A18 chip, but 16 number iPhone. So anyways, I think that like my wife has a 12 Pro right now, and I think we're going to upgrade her this year, but she could probably even go another year on a 12 Pro. So iPhones these days are lasting so much longer. It's almost like in certain ways, of course, if you get the latest model car, right? Maybe the new car will have like some new features that'd be really convenient and nice to have, just like with phones. Like you're going to get the new camera button. You'll get a nicer camera. You'll get the 5x zoom. And I think some of those are really nice benefits. I would be more motivated to upgrade if I was someone who, if I like outside of course, like being in tech and covering tech on YouTube and stuff like that, like outside of that whole racket, like just normal day-to-day use, I think the one everyday person scenario that would maybe encourage me to be more aggressive about upgrading would be if I used my phone camera a lot to, let's say, document family pictures and things like that, or whatever else you wanted to document with your maybe your trips or whatever. And you don't own a big camera or some kind of, camera to take pictures with, and you just use your iPhone for that, then usually the leaps and bounds ahead, especially once you get to like 2 generations ahead of where you are, then you really start to see big jumps in the camera performance. And so that's where I think if you use your camera a lot, either for video or photo, that's where maybe it would make sense to be more aggressive. Otherwise, I don't really see too much of a need to upgrade these days because the phones are so advanced. Another thing would be, of course, right now, Apple Intelligence. If you feel like Apple Intelligence is really going to be super helpful to you, then you could upgrade there. But you could also just use some cloud-based AI from somebody else like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude as another trendy one these days. You could play with one of those and they're in the cloud, so it doesn't matter what your iPhone hardware is. So, but of course, that's not going to be tied into all your Apple user data. So trade-offs there, I think things to consider, but also with the Apple Intelligence, we've yet to really see what it's all going to be about publicly. So I think those are some things to consider. Yeah. Because you went with the Pro, not the, and I think that's another reason too. If you take a lot of photos, it's another reason to spend the extra money whenever you do happen to upgrade and get the Pro model versus the non-Pro. Although this year, man, the non-Pro is a really great phone relative to everything else available right now. I would love to see Apple revive their networking products. Please, yes, please, and thank you. Maybe if and when they start manufacturing their own cellular chips, they could do cellular home internet. I don't know about the cellular home internet, but I've always wished and hoped that because Apple got into the idea with iCloud Plus that they do iCloud Private Relay, which is not a VPN, but sort of along the same lines. And I think there's a definite market for Apple in the services realm to ship a Apple networking router mesh Wi-Fi product that then also gives them a way to sell some version of iCloud Private Relay for a subscription. Maybe you and I sign up for it, maybe we don't. But either way, I think there's probably a compelling case for Apple to sell that as a product. I think plenty of people would sign up for it. They could make a lot of commercials talking about all the stuff your ISP can do to spy on you and other people, and how, it's all about privacy. And another challenge of sort of those whole home VPNs, or just let's say you want to have your iPhone on a VPN all the time, right? For privacy reasons, and you have it connected. Sometimes that can be a little wonky when you're at home trying to get that to talk to your smart home devices if you're connected to a VPN. Sometimes it works fine, sometimes it doesn't. But that can always be something as you're troubleshooting. And so Apple could sort of smooth out some of those rough edges, especially with something that would, intelligently be a VPN when you're away from home on your Apple devices. And then when you're at home, it would be a whole home VPN that's just done at your networking layer. So that's what I would love to see Apple do. And I think they could make a bunch of money from the services outside of it. And I've talked a little bit about that on the channel a while ago. I think maybe with my newsletter, I wrote that a while ago. But I completely think Apple should do that. But who knows if they actually will. It's hard to say with all the different products they have. But I mean, they're always looking for growth and new sources of revenue, and I think that would be a pretty sizable one. Oh, thank you, Brenda. All right. So, we're coming up at about almost an hour. One thing that I wanted to add that is just, we'll close this off in a few minutes, but I do have one other story I just wanted to tell too, which is how I came upon this poster. So there's a local Mac enthusiast group conference called, well, it happens in the Chicago area, but it's not local. People travel to it, called Mac Stock. It's not very big, but it's kind of feels a lot like some of those old Mac user groups. And they had actually some people who were not me. I just went as an attendee, but they had some people talking about Apple Home and smart home tech, which was fun to watch, and stuff like that, and hear what people had to say about that. But there was someone there from a user group where someone had come upon a bunch of these posters of different styles from old Apple marketing, and they had unfortunately passed away, and just their family wanted them to go to good homes. So long story short, those ended up at MacStock, and they were giving them away for free to various people. So I took one, and so this is a old official real Apple marketing poster. It says "Think Different" at the bottom, and yum. This was to sell the iMacs, the candy colored iMacs, and because they're candy colored, I think that was the idea of the ad, that they look like something you could eat. And that's how I came across that poster, and I got it framed, and then just felt like it fit well in this space, so I put it up. So that's, I guess, the little bit of the story behind that poster and where it came from. But it's as best I know, it is a legit poster from back in the day, old Apple marketing. But let's see if there's any more questions before we close it out. Oh, yeah. Some people asking about PoE. Power over Ethernet is basically just, if you have the option for anything in your smart home, hardwired. It's one of the things I love about Sonos compared to HomePods, is that you can hardwire the connection to a lot of Sonos. I think pretty much all Sonos speakers. Some of them require a dongle, but you can hardwire the connection. Maybe the Move wouldn't fit into that, or the Roam, but otherwise, stationary Sonos speakers, you can hardwire the connection. And then with cameras as well, with PoE, you can hardwire the connection. So PoE just basically means that you're delivering a low power, but power source and data over the same cable. And so you might see in a big office PoE phones, right, where they'll just plug in the Ethernet cable, and then the phone will get power and data right there on a desk or something like that. And then in home or small business or professional video surveillance, then there are options where you can just use that cable to power a video camera. And just wired connections are always going to be more reliable than wireless. So having that connection being hardwired from outside your home, especially if you can get the Ethernet cable out to this outdoor camera and then running it into your home, straight into your home network, you'll need to use some kind of special PoE switch to run power for it. I use Ubiquiti products, which have PoE built into some of their Ethernet ports, meaning it's going to send power and data out of it. You can also get these things called PoE injectors, which will basically just add that power to that Ethernet cable. But that just makes the connection so much more reliable because, of course, it's always getting power, so you don't have to worry about having the camera battery run out because there's no need for a battery, and it's always getting reliable data. Doesn't have to worry about any kind of interference with the Wi-Fi or the Wi-Fi going out. And with all that too, you can easily run Ethernet through homes. I'm not aware of all the construction codes in all the different places, but you can generally get away with a lot running Ethernet because it's not a high amount of electricity, and it's really just a data cable, and people run them all over for all kinds of reasons. So if you're trying to get something like for example, the Eve outdoor cam, you can put that on top of an existing light fixture, but if you want to put it in a new place, you'll have to get basically a light fixture style box installed somewhere outside your home, and that would require some decent electrical knowledge or hiring someone like an electrician, whereas you can probably do a PoE camera yourself. And some of the easy ways a lot of people do it is if you can get it in your walls and then up into, let's say for outdoor cameras, up into like an attic, and then through what's called the eaves, or that like little part where your roof comes out over the edge of your home, and then you can run it down through that and then have the camera mounted on the corner of your home. That can be a nice way in a lot of homes. That's how I have it in my garage, where it goes up into my garage attic and then down through the eave on the side of the home and into the camera that's right there on the edge of the garage. And it's really nice because that camera is way far away, relatively speaking, to my router but my access point for Wi-Fi. And it still is able to get quality data signal really fast just because it's hardwired. So even though maybe, you might look at like, oh, basic Ethernet non-gigabit is 100 megabits per second. Well, my Wi-Fi does way faster than that, but it's like, that's your Wi-Fi at peak speeds. Usually the average speed of Ethernet is probably still going to be faster depending on circumstances, or even if it isn't, it's going to be more reliable. So as a long little rant there about Ethernet and why it's good. Oh yeah. Caroline noticed my Yum poster. Yeah, that was what's going on there. So explain that. Oh, thank you, John. I'm glad you guys like that. Thank you, Shane, for clarifying to Caroline. I don't need to explain it at CES about that. Yes. And Shane also endorses from the man himself, PoE is better than Wi-Fi. So, and same as here, also agreement from Edgar's Home Tech. Yeah, great way to describe it. Ethernet plus power in one cable. So thank you guys so much for joining. It's good to just get together and talk about iPhones, Apple announcements, new products. Even if I should have been up on more of the details of the Philips Hue Sync box, I kind of just slipped that one in there because I never really talked about it last week. But oh well, it's not really a major area of focus for me. But there's a new one out there. You can probably learn more about it from people other than me. Anyways, but thanks so much for tuning in. Really good to have you guys here, and I'll see you soon on other YouTube content. Have a good one. Bye.